Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm going to give just a little bit of time. I'm going to have a guest today, not doing a solo. Actually, one of my friends, Jackie Hackett. She's a registered dietitian, and we're going to be talking a lot about nutrition. So I'm going to kind of give it a little bit of time and let her come in and let some other people come in. And I want to thank my friend Michael Holt for giving me this cool sweater, Savage and Saints, really nice. It has all these kind of logos on the sides and a cool logo on the back. So I just want to thank him for the sweater, et cetera, et cetera. So Greg Halisos, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm sorry if sorry if I'm not. But I see a few other people jumped in, so welcome everyone. Hope everyone is having a good week and a good Friday. And I saw Jackie jumped in as well, so I will add Jackie. Yes. Okay. Send invite. Cool. Get a sip of coffee here.
Hey, hey.
Hey, Jackie, what's going on?
Not much. Happy Friday. How are
Hey,
you?
good. Good to see you.
Good
Drinking
to see
coffee
you.
here, organic, of course, out of glass, never plastic. So.
Your cold brew?
No, it's actually warm. Now it's cold here. So now I'm making warm coffee like in the mornings. Kind of a little bit of a sissy now, not as hardcore as I used to be. So,
You've
so
grown weak.
it is true. Society has weakened me over time, the comforts of society. Nate, Greg, good to see you. So today it'll just be like very casual. We'll be covering obviously health topics like we always cover on these lives, and I'll be letting Jackie kind of take over for the most part today. And we'll be chatting about like nutrition. Oftentimes I hear people say, I eat healthy, which is, I know it's almost comical at this point because with 9 out of 10 Americans being metabolically unhealthy currently, 50% of Americans developing cancer within their lifetime, and close to like 1.5 million deaths between cancer and heart attacks in America alone every single year. You kind of wonder, well, with 9 out of 10 metabolically unhealthy Americans and, even like close to 100,000 people dying from type 2 diabetes every single year, you're like, what is going on? Because a lot of people, even today, I actually ran into someone that was about like I would say 60 or 70 pounds overweight. And he was just telling me about how healthy he was eating. And he didn't understand why he's 60 or 70 pounds overweight, which is like basically impossible if you're actually like eating whole food, like actual real nutritious food for yourself. And of course, it's going to vary from person to person, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, today we're going to cover what I eat healthy even means and setting up like a clear definition of what that is. And Jackie, just take it from here, kind of throw random ideas around. It's like a coffee shop type of podcast here. So yeah, it's just good to catch up with you too. For you guys who don't know, Jackie is a good friend of mine, and she's very knowledgeable. She's been not a certified nutritionist, an actual registered dietitian, two different things. And we'll talk about like the legality of those phrases and stuff like that later, so people are clear about who they're hiring, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, what's your take, Jackie? I know you deal with obviously a lot of unhealthy people, and because pathology for the most part has been very normalized in our society today, a lot of people come to you and they're very sick, they're very overweight, they're not feeling good, their sex drive is very low, and they'll look at you like dead in the eye, and honestly, they will honestly say this to you: I'm eating healthy. I don't know what's going on. What goes through your mind when you kind of hear that, and what kind of let's kind of dive into that.
I mean, it's definitely very nuanced. Well, yeah, first off, thanks for having me, Eugene. Good to see you.
Yep.
Great to catch up. Um, it's very nuanced, but not everyone comes to me saying that they eat healthy. So I will say that. I think people need to be a bit more honest with themselves, though. A biggest thing in what we learn in grad school is we do this like 24-hour recall where we just say, hey, for the last 24 hours, what did you eat? And with that, we understand that there is a lot of inaccuracies and there's only so much validity to that report, right? that we're then using in research to create all these studies from. I mean, do you remember everything that you ate yesterday? Like, we as
Yes.
humans are, okay, you're a very unique individual, Eugene.
I'm like, I
Um,
could send you spreadsheets.
you know, down to the ounce and the micronutrients and everything. But no, majority of people, well, and that's also an issue, right? Is people lack
That's
that
true.
awareness. They don't have the mindfulness to think of what are you putting in your body. So like I take a step back, right? I have my undergrad in psychology, my master's in nutrition, and I know you study a lot about the human mind and trying to understand people. Is we have to, it's not just about what are you eating, but it's helping get to the psychology behind it, right? Why are you eating what you're eating? Is it how you were raised, your culture, your background? Maybe you didn't have access to food. Maybe your resources were limited. Maybe your family just lacked education on what is healthy, right? A lot of it is lack of knowledge and awareness. Lack of awareness of knowing if I eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, I'm probably going to feel like crap later. But if you're eating that every single day, you don't realize that you're feeling like crap because
Hmm.
that is the norm, right? And you and I both know that very well, right? We gave up fast food forever ago, maybe besides an In-N-Out burger every now and then, but you don't even have In-N-Out anymore where you are. So,
No, there is. It takes a
wait,
solid
really?
35 minutes to get there, though.
Is it new?
No, it's not new. I don't,
Oh,
well, actually, I don't know. But there are a bunch of memes in the area where people are like vomiting when eating In and Out. It's not a popular thing here, you know?
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but
Well,
if you want In and Out here, I mean, it has to be like a day-long event. You know, you have to be really, really wanting it, you know, to drive drive that
okay.
far.
If you're in the area, then I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, in LA, it's everywhere within 10 to 15 minutes of us. But um, so yeah, it goes so much into, yeah, people are coming to me. Maybe they think they're eating healthy, maybe not. Obviously, there's an issue and something going on as to why they're coming to see me. And nutrition is a huge component of that. But I do consider myself to be a holistic dietitian. So we do have to look at the bigger picture, which I know you absolutely do as well. And that goes into your lifestyle, your sleep, your stress levels, your relationships, your work. Are you commuting to work? EMF lights. I mean, all of that. I know that you talk about all the time. That all goes into quote unquote, am I healthy or not? Right. And yeah, I am a dietitian. I focus on nutrition, but that's just one, piece to the puzzle of many. But to your question, people are coming to me saying they're eating healthy. Then I have to dig deep and kind of assess. Honestly, I found the easiest thing in the beginning is like just take a picture and show me what you're eating, because the food logging thing, for some people it works. That has its inaccuracies as well, so we can only get so much from that. Um, but I take what people say with a grain of salt, and then we kind of have to dive deeper. And you have to kind of ask those questions. Well, oh, did you pass by your boss's desk that had a bunch of candy? And oh yeah, oh, I forgot. Like I stopped there 5 times and grabbed, M&Ms every time I passed. That wasn't logged in their, or in their memory. Maybe they weren't even aware that they were doing that because they're so stressed and they just grabbed that a few times, right? So a lot of it is first and foremost having people build mindfulness awareness to begin with, at least in terms of how I work with my clients. Before we can even get into like, what is a healthy diet, right? What does that even mean? How do we define it? And also a big thing to me, and I think you and I have I agree with almost everything that you believe as well, Eugene. I think that's why we get along so well. Um, but in terms of what does health mean, I do have my clients define that.
Hmm.
To you, health is also, a body fat percentage number. It's maybe how much can you lift. It's your physique. It's your aesthetics. I practice from more of an intuitive eating perspective. So I'm not so much about what is your body fat percentage. I'm like, how do you feel? How does the food make you feel? How's your energy levels? Which you do as well, right? But I kind of get more into what does health truly mean to that individual? Is it getting off of medication? Is it preventing cancer from coming back or spreading? Is it, keeping their blood sugars in check and not having to go back on medication? Or for some people, it's, hey, I'm not on any medication. Let's keep it that way, more so preventative. And we have to meet people where they're at as well, right?
Yeah, so you kind of hinted at a few important things in terms of, I say this often because it is true of like pathology has been normalized, and it's tough for people to have like base marks or definition to like, man, I am super fucked up, because they kind of like normalize it in the sense I especially saw this in corporate culture. It's like the guy could actually be like very overweight, have knee, back pain on two different medications, but the guy next to him is like so much worse. So in perspective, the guy's like, well, I'm doing just fine. Where in reality, both of them are doing terribly. Just one is doing far worse than the other.
Yeah.
So I have like a few procedures in mind in order to increase conscious awareness of that there is pathology arising. Like I shared with you, the HAQ, that I got from the Czech Institute is a great resource. Also, I found just having clients take their pictures from the front, side, and back. Like for females, it would be obviously with sportswear, and then for males without a shirt. But just seeing them seeing themselves from an outside perspective, just increases their awareness of like from a body fat perspective. Like, man, I am way heavier than I thought. Because oftentimes, weight gain or excess body fat gain is a very gradual, long-term process. And people see themselves every day, and it's kind of like watching grass grow. You gain about 5 pounds of extra body fat like every year, so it's not noticeable. But hey, 4 years goes by, you're 20 pounds overweight. 8 years goes by, you're like 40 pounds overweight. And day to day, you kind of look the same. Yes, your shirts feel a little tighter, but then of course you just buy the bigger shirt and it all feels the same. And it keeps people in this kind of quicksand of mental and physical pathology, just basically, for the most part, lowering their standards and just kind of numbing themselves out that there's something wrong. And eventually they're like, well, this is normal. This is how life is. I mean, look at everyone around me at work, same exact way, et cetera, et cetera. But are there any tips you can tell a person, like any, like what Paul Chek would refer to as like the pain teacher? What is pain teaching you, or something of that sort that they could use to come to the realization that, hey, maybe I'm not, in terms of the context of this podcast, maybe I'm not eating healthy. Maybe my definition of eating healthy isn't right, and I need to look for other definitions.
Yeah, I'm not entirely familiar with, I didn't study Paul Chek as deeply as you did. Shout out to him though, because he did help in healing, me through my sciatica and other things. But in terms of what you're saying, in terms of healthy nutrition, healthy gut is really kind of where I focus on, right? Taking a look at like everything stems from the gut, right? So if you were to focus on like one thing, how are your bowel movements, right? Or if you're not pooping at least once a day, hopefully maybe twice, like I'd start there. You don't know. So that's another thing, right? Normalized. I talk to patients. I'm like, how frequently do you have bowel movements? And it's like, oh, a couple times a week. I've always been that way. My parents were that way. Well, that's not normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So starting with things like that can help us start to dig deeper. Okay, well, what is the real issue going on here? Our immune system stems from our gut. Skin issues, eczema, psoriasis stem from our gut. Our hormones are made in the gut. So if we're not feeding our gut an adequate fiber, I think that's one very easy measurable thing to assess how is your nutrition. Just track for a couple of days. How much fiber are you getting in, right? Women, minimum 25 grams, men 30 to 35 grams per day of fiber. That's one easy way to kind of measure, right? How is your nutrition quality and nutrition status? What else can I speak to without being like, in terms of like just starting out, right? Like, am I eating healthy or not? Thinking of like what goes on your plate, just visually looking at it Do you have veggies on your plate? I think we can start there as like, not everyone has veggies on their plate every single meal. And that's pretty basic of we need a non-starchy vegetable, right? Potatoes, corn, and green peas are starchy veggies. We can still eat them, right? But they're not going to be majority of our plate. Are we getting colorful veggies on our plate? Taking up, at least half of our plate. I know your recommendations with your clients is veggies are unlimited, but are people actually abiding to that, right? And following that? Because again, fiber, nutrients, micronutrients, the flavonoids we get from all of those vegetables there, right? Again, so looking back at the plate, do we have our veggies? What's our protein source? Some people may skimp out on the protein, right? You and I both know how important protein is for satiety, for building muscle, also for our immune system, for our bones. Is there adequate protein, right? And it's a common thing I see in women, especially older women. Maybe this is just, demographic I've dealt with, is they're kind of afraid to eat enough protein. Like, oh, I'll have a Caesar salad, but there's no chicken. I'm like, okay, well, we got to add some protein to that, right? And people think like, oh, I'm eating a salad. So that's actually a great example, right? People think, oh, I'm eating healthy. I'm eating a salad. Well, what's on your salad? You're loading it up with ranch dressing and cheese and I don't know, and like romaine lettuce, right? Which is non-nutritive. It's just water, which, hey, it's great. It has water in it. But there's no real like veggies. Maybe there's no beans, there's no fiber, there's really nothing more to it. You're just eating nothing at that point, right? Plus the extra fat and calories from the dressings and the toppings. Right. So yeah, the plate, I think, is a big thing people can look at. And so last component of the plate being our carbohydrates, right? Mm-hmm. Our nutrient fiber dense carbohydrates, right? Of course, there's bread, rice, pasta, cookies, crackers, candy kind of thing. But are we getting, things like quinoa, oatmeal, sweet potato, butternut squash, those nutrient packed, high fiber, carbohydrate sources, right? So I think I would start there, right? Fiber and what's going on your plate, for people to really truly assess like, okay, am I eating healthy or not? And then you can really kind of dive deeper into that, but that's kind of really easy, simple way everyone listening right now can just kind of start there and then truly assess with themselves, how am I matching up to that?
Yeah, you mentioned there's a lot more that goes into it, so we'll actually go into that a lot more right now. But you mentioned a few things. So I think one of the easiest things to do is just to if anything, kind of look at your bowel movements after you go, you know what I mean? Turn around and check out what's going on. So can you give the listeners any tips on signs of that they're not eating healthy by how their bowel movements actually look? Because there's a lot of confusion there as well, but that's just an easy free test you can do pretty much almost daily to determine whether you're on the right path or not.
Yep. So there's something called the Bristol Stool Form Scale. And just, warning, disclaimer to all who are uncomfortable about talking about poop. As a dietitian, I talk about poop all day long. And I think we should also normalize that everyone poops, right? There's like a little children's book about it, right? You can easily just look it up, right? Bristol Stool Form Scale, and take a look at your poop when you go and compare it to that scale, right? You may be pooping, but you could still be constipated. If your poop is we call it kind of like rabbit pellet-like, like just like little droppings, that's a sign that you were constipated. Versus, do you have more of a formed snake-like, kind of longer the better, poop? Means that you are having a very healthy bowel movement, and you're getting all the nutrients that you need. Versus the other end of it, which we call kind of type 6, type 7, is being, kind of lumpy, mushy, and then all the way on the other end would be like watery diarrhea. All right, so we kind of want to stay in that middle end of well-formed, kind of longer looking, like a log.
Yeah, you did mention stuff about fiber too, and oftentimes when I mention fiber to clients, the first thing is like, oh, which fiber supplements do I need to take? Yeah, I feel that's total like Western mindset of heading towards like pharmaceutical drugs, supplements. You can't get it from real food. It didn't exist before science existed. So can you kind of displace some myths there in terms of navigating people to the right sources of fiber, like hopefully from like actual real food instead of like GNC supplements or any kind of supplements at that?
Yeah. And okay, I'll explain that, and then we can mention the supplement, fiber supplement itself. And let's just preface also like what is fiber, to clarify that in case people are unaware, right? Dietary fiber is essentially, it's the undigestible part of plant material, right? So there's two kinds of fiber. There's soluble, meaning, if you remember from chemistry, right? Soluble meaning it dissolves in water. It's broken down into like a gel-like substance, right? It's a part in part of the colon, right? Then there's insoluble fiber, doesn't dissolve in water, so it means it's kind of forming, building, bulking your stool, helping it pass through, right? So fiber is not just important for helping us poop, though. Fiber is probably more important for serving our gut bacteria, right? Our gut bacteria feed off of the fiber. And then break it down into short chain fatty acids, butyrate, all these other things, right? So different kinds of fiber that we can get from food, right? So fruits and veggies are going to be our number one source, although they are not the highest source of fiber, though, right? We can actually get more fiber from beans, from lentils, from our whole grains, things like quinoa, buckwheat, other whole grain sources, even like, did I say oatmeal? Oatmeal, a whole grain bread, right? Like Dave's Killer Bread, Ezekiel bread are some of my favorite bread sources. But yeah, beans, like 1 cup of beans, any kind of bean, navy bean, black bean, pinto, about 8 to 9 grams of fiber in 1 cup, right? So that's a pretty good source. From there, avocados also pretty high in fiber as well, and then just our just fruits and veggies in general, right?
Okay.
Nuts and seeds, lastly, right? I'm a huge fan. If you just want to start tomorrow, really super quick, easy way to get in more fiber, chia seeds or hemp seeds, flax seeds are the easiest way, right? 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. You get protein and fiber from it, about 10 grams of fiber, and it does have some healthy omega-3 fatty acids as well. So great source of fiber.
Can you talk about in terms of like, because a lot of Americans are on medications and the awareness should be raised about like how a lot of these medications actually hurt your gut microbiome and make digestion difficult, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm not all too familiar. Yes, I know there are side effects with any medication. Some medications can constipate you. In terms of damaging the gut microbiome, I'm honestly not all that familiar with that research, so I don't want to speak to that. But even things like, like steroids or opioids are constipating. Other medications, right, like antibiotics can cause diarrhea. A lot of medications can cause diarrhea. Antibiotics specifically, though, I'm familiar with, they wipe out your entire gut microbiome because they're killing both good and bad bacteria. So that's why, if possible, right, do you really need the antibiotic, right? We have to be thinking, is there an alternative? Like in functional medicine, right? We have lots of antimicrobial, antifungal, natural remedies that we could be using instead of the antibiotics. I'm not saying don't take antibiotics if you are very, very sick and you need it, right? Absolutely, we need those in that moment. But if you're taking it consistently, it is definitely going to damage your gut microbiome, possibly lead to dysbiosis, all sorts of other, gut-related issues.
Can you talk about like your opinions in terms of like the medical community's approach to gut issues? Because oftentimes, at least from my experience, it was like basically like oh, don't change anything about your behavior, your nutrition here, just take more antibiotics and or this or that, just basically just take more drugs and let's wish for the best and hopefully you just disappear and don't come back basically, and go to another doctor when you find out it doesn't work at the end of the day anyways.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll give you a referral to see, oh my God, what is I'm totally blanking on,
Registered dietitian.
no.
No?
That's
Okay.
my role. No, actually,
I was
yeah,
trying to
it's
recommend
very
you here.
rare. Very rare for a doctor to recommend, yeah, to see a dietitian. But honestly, what I constantly see, no, I mean, what I was going to say is to see a GI doctor, right, gastroenterologist. To get that referral is already challenging. But 9 times out of 10, I used to work for one of the largest HMOs in the US, and 9 times out of 10, when these patients were coming to me, they had severe gut issues going on for a long period of time. They were simply told to eat more fiber. They were given, hey, take some Metamucil, drink more water, go see the dietitian. That was it. Maybe a doctor might have mentioned something about the low FODMAP diet and handed them a handout and said, go with it, which I absolutely do not recommend anyone to start a low FODMAP diet without first consulting a dietitian. Really, yeah, the frustrations. We can make a whole episode on this, Eugene.
No, that's what the episode is for.
No,
no,
I'm
just say whatever's on your mind.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just lack of knowledge, lack of willingness for the doctors to want to understand that there are lots of other really helpful and beneficial treatment protocols that we can be using to help these patients. But number one, if they're just giving this overarching IBS, right? That's commonly what I see. They label you as IBS. That's just telling you, hey, you have these symptoms and you fall under this bucket. That's not getting to the root cause, right? And you and I both know, I mean, Western medicine is never getting to the root cause. They don't ask you any questions about your stress levels, your sleep, your relationships, any of that, which all influence your gut microbiome, right? The brain-gut axis. Brain and gut are so connected. So if we are overly stressed, that alone can cause so many GI issues, right? Just think about you have a test coming up, or you have a wedding, even you're stressed. Maybe you have diarrhea, you have bubbly guts, right? That's a very minor one, but think about that stress every single day, day in and day out, starts to build and build and build. Now you have chronic constipation for 5 years, right? Because of that stress. And then you add on top of that, having a poor diet, not eating enough fiber, not exercising, not drinking enough water. That all kind of, adds on top of it. Doctors are not asking those questions to understand, right? Oh, it's all these other things that have now led to these symptoms. So we have to address those things, right? We have to take a look. It could even be trauma from childhood that is now impacting our gut health, right? So much tied into, right, that chakra. If you have childhood traumas, right? So there's thing called, I don't know, are you familiar with the ACE, Adverse Childhood Events test? So that could be something to consider. It's hard to talk about trauma with clients, and it may never even get brought up, but I think it's so important to really understand the whole background behind it, because it could be an unresolved trauma that's causing their gut issues 40 years old that happened, when they were 10 years old. So those questions, there's not enough time. Doctors have I don't remember now what the average is, 3 minutes to be with you. They don't get to that. So luckily, they could come to me. I usually have about 45 minutes. I usually would give them an hour, though, and I would I would put extra time to finish my note with them, because I knew they needed the help. They needed the support to really dive deep. Then we can come up with a plan, right? That treatment protocol that's assessing, is there dysbiosis, right? Western medicine, we can't even run the GI map tests, right? It's not covered by a lot of insurances. And I know you and I both have taken it and have found great help with that. You take the test, you just give a stool sample, and then we can assess that. So that's a huge, huge help. It really is the gold standard to assessing, if there's inflammation in your gut lining, overgrowth of bacteria. That's not even considered in Western medicine, right? So there's all these tests, all these protocols, treatments, herbs that can be utilized that unfortunately, Western medicine has, chosen to turn the other way. You and I have talked about this before. There's big pharma at the door of the doctors, like, hey, here's a new medication for IBS, or here's this medication. The funding and the research is going to XYZ, when over here we actually have things that work and are proven. They're just not fully adopted by Western medicine and doctors. So it's unfortunate, but there are lots of functional medicine doctors out there, and holistic dietitians who can help out with those things, right? Just as you've gone to them to help you with your own issues.
Yeah. That's funny that you bring up the 3 minutes. I didn't even know it was down to 3 minutes. I keep saying 15 minutes on my podcast. Yeah. I'm like, damn, it's really gone down. I'm like, dude, 3 minutes for
15 minutes. No way.
Okay. I was maybe giving them
3 might be under us. Maybe 10. We'll average it out.
But even 10 minutes would give me like anxiety, like running from patient to patient and only knowing I had like 10 minutes to talk with them. In fact, I was in a forum one time with a bunch of MDs that like were trying to attack me basically. And I was saying like, oh, when first meeting a patient, you need like 1 to 3 hours to actually really get to, depending on the patient's circumstance, their level of pathology, how long it's been around, et cetera, et cetera. But look at even credible clinical practitioners like we mentioned Paul Chek or Dr. Stuart McGill, for example. Dr. Stuart McGill specializes just literally in the back. I'm sure he has a lot of great knowledge throughout human health in general, but his specialty is there. And he's saying like, oh, I need to spend like 3 hours doing a low back assessment, like the one I did with you, for example. And we spent like a solid like 2.5 hours just examining that small part, of the body. And I was telling the doctors in this forum, I'm like, oh, how could you do? Or like I spent this amount of time with this and we have to run all these tests. And he's like, and one of the doctors was like trying to be smart. And he's like, oh, well, try to do all that in 5 minutes. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that in 5 minutes because I care about my clients and patients, And he's like, well, good job working at a hospital and getting that to work. And I'm like, well, if I really cared about my clients and patients, I would just go work for myself, because clearly the hospital, clearly the medical system these days in terms of corporate medical is not facilitating clients' health whatsoever. And I guarantee you guys, if you're going to a doctor, especially for the first time, maybe not necessarily for follow-up visits for sure, but especially for the first time, and like Jackie mentioned, they're chatting with you for like 3-10 minutes, even 15 minutes, dude, just run away. This person's like literally has you on a conveyor belt business type system where they just need to pump clients in and out like as quickly as possible. But I guarantee you when you have any one pathology, there are usually a myriad of things going on that are leading to that pathology. And unless all of those issues are dealt with, the best you can do is have like some kind of short-term relief of issue ABC just to have it come back actually more severe in the future, or just have another issue come back where you're basically in this cycle of chasing symptoms your entire life. This thing one day, now the next day this thing, now the next day this thing. And basically what the healthcare system refers to these people as is like the 401k client. They stay healthy enough to keep returning back for visits, but never actually resolve their issues to not have to return back ever again. So the doctors and everything, they just add them to their BMW fund or their college tuition. And of course, like they have to send a letter thanking you for not changing your behavior that led to problem ABC, because now they can have you pay for their kids' college tuition so their kids can have a great time. So it's good that you're doing that charity instead of changing your behavior and stuff like that. That kind of boggles my mind, because especially we both had back injuries, and once you find good help, dude, it's like so easy to get out of it. You know what I mean? But finding good help
Yeah.
is so tough. And I'm like, it almost makes you kind of a little bit angry at yourself. It's like, why didn't I see this before? You know, why didn't I meet this person earlier, etc. Stuff of that sort. And and I just feel like even genuinely when people are looking for help, it's just very tough to find these days in today's like conveyor belt factory farm like medical system or healthcare system in general, where it's like they need people coming in and out quickly. You know, it's like if I mean, in short, I say this often, but it's just as clear as day, and only a retard would not agree with me. Is basically like if you have like a rock stuck inside your shoe. I mean, even a little child would agree that like, hey, the best thing to do is take the shoe off, take the rock out, put the shoe back in, and walk pain free. You know, but all our healthcare providers these days are like, no, man, keep the rock there. Just take these painkillers instead. You know, that's like basically what's happening.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, and I think we put a lot of trust into our healthcare system. I mean, for me as example, I trusted that the people were giving me the best care that they could. And yeah, I got an MRI. They took care of me. They easily wrote me pain prescriptions. But it wasn't getting to the root cause of what it was. And not until I went to go pay out of pocket and couldn't go through insurance that I did finally find healthcare providers who really truly cared. And well, I can't say that my previous ones didn't care. I don't know, but they were stuck and confined to the system, you know, that's housing them, that they work for. But not until I could go to private people who were thinking outside the box and not confined to what you know, has to be billed for on insurance, that I could finally get the help that I needed. You know, I saw 5 different PTs, 2 chiropractors, acupuncture. Not until a year and a half into my healing did I finally find the right team to help me. And it's just, I'm so thankful for that. And not everyone can go through that, right? And have that privilege to do so. But we have to keep letting people know, like, we have to question everything, right? We have to question, is this the right thing for me? Am I getting everything that I need? And not, I don't want to say not trust our healthcare system, but
I think it's
just
okay
know
to say
there are
that.
alternatives. Okay. Hey, no, if I'm in a serious accident and I need a
Yeah,
surgery, by all
of
means,
course.
yes, please take me to my nearest hospital. I will trust those surgeons. But
I'm
yeah,
more
when
over
it comes
referring to those
to,
like pill popper, pill
yeah,
poppers, pill drug addicts, basically dealing drugs to other drug addicts that don't want to change the behavior that led to problem ABC.
yep.
I actually train a few emergency medical staff, and I really do believe they're like angels in the sky. You know, they really do come save your life when time is needed. And I'm not talking about like that side of the medical industry at all. I'm just simply
Oh yeah,
referring
ER
to,
medicine is like a saving grace. Those people, for
yes,
sure.
yeah, I'm simply referring to that, like, you know, family physician. You come in there and you're like 70 hours a week, work weeks, and mega stressed out. And instead of suggesting to the client, like, hey, you know, die down your work hours. Oh, here, take this maximum 100 milligrams of anxiety medication, you know, and fuck it, keep working. Because oftentimes I find like health professionals, especially in the medical community, are not healthy themselves, the bulk majority of
No.
them. So even if they had the time to talk to you about health, they wouldn't actually know what to say because they're overworked. Oftentimes they're on medical drugs. Decent amount of them are also, you know, like borderline alcoholics as well, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, dude, they're overworked. They don't know how to apply these health principles in real life and actually make it happen and work in real life. When I talk to nutrition about, with most doctors, there are some that are amazing and would totally blow me out of the water. But when I talk with most of them, it's like even one doctor I had an argument with, he was like literally arguing with me about why it's a bad idea to get like 70% of your calories from cereal every day. You know, like
Oh, you
asking me to
told me about that.
yeah, asking me to prove this to him. Like it's a bad idea to do that. I'm like, dude, how are these people even making a living, like whatsoever? Which is an indication that like people are just completely lost in terms of what health really is. because the fact that people like this could actually make a living for themselves is a huge red flag already, stuff of that sort. So, and I find like another thing that's a big issue with that kind of conveyor belt healthcare system is there's very little follow-up for behavioral change. Inevitably, you need someone to have consistent follow-up sessions with you and also just iron out the details and the speed bumps of any health journey. It's not like you could be like, okay, here's the manual. It's like 2,000 pages long. All the answers are there. It's like me giving a person a manual to construct a car from scratch. Even if all the answers are literally there, like how many people would actually be able to do that? How do you know which parts to get? How do you know if the parts aren't counterfeit? Do you have a place to build this car? How many tools do you need? Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's basically the same, and cars are way less complicated than human health, right? So a lot of times,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
absolutely.
so yeah, that's why it's like, oh, go eat better. Okay, that's like the same as like telling like a person that has an alcohol problem, oh, just stop drinking. Obviously, like, why didn't I think of that before? That I needed to stop drinking, stuff
Yeah,
of that
no,
sort.
but
So
it's people know what to do in the most part. I mean, there are some who really truly need the education, but a good portion of people know what to do. But that accountability and behavior change takes time. It takes patience, and it takes, right? I mean, I have really, like I tell my clients, it is a 6 to 12 month process of healing and changing and adopting these long-term sustainable behavior changes, right? We have to look at your habits. We have to dig deep. We have to reflect. And no manual one size fits all thing can just be handed to someone or given meds and saying, okay, come back in next year for your physical and let's see, did you put it into action? How's your cholesterol now? Like, no, that's not how we're going to see any progress.
yeah, and I find a lot of times too, and I'm sure you see this often, is just, I mean, I hate to say it, and there's certain parts of me that it's true with as well, but it's just a lot of people. I actually got this from one of my mentors, Brian Carroll, great guy. Uh, when I kept like tweaking my back here and there after my initial injury, at one point he said to me something super powerful, and it just totally clicked and lit up like a light bulb in my head. And I always took self-responsibility for my actions, but this phrase kind of gave me just a new heightened level of that kind of understanding. And he mentioned, like, I tweaked it again, and I'm like, oh man, my back's hurting again. He's like, well, that's okay, Eugene, because now at this point, after he's already provided me with the answers of how to stay pain free, now at this point, you're doing it to yourself, which is super powerful, because if you're doing it to
Mm.
yourself, you can stop anytime, and that like instantly clicked. I'm like, oh shit, I am totally fucking my life, by continuing to do this. And a lot of people can benefit from that kind of mindset. But I think a lot of people at the end of the day are just so stuck oftentimes in an unsustainable lifestyle that it will be almost an existential crisis if you tell them they have to change who they were as a person to resolve this issue. So to avoid that, they're like, oh, well, you mean I could just take this pill and everything will magically disappear? It won't. It won't magically disappear. It'll actually get worse over time if you do that route from my observation. But I feel like they're actually looking for that. They're actually looking for that escape. And as Robert Kiyosaki would say, people use excuses as like a form of escape, because
Yeah.
it takes away the responsibility of actually finding a real solution. And that could be actually stressful to do.
I mean, I think people are ultimately afraid of that change, and like you said, it's adopting a new identity. And in the book Atomic Habits, right, by James Clear, he talks a lot about that. Of like, you have all these goals, and it's not like, oh yeah, check off the box, I walked today, I ate healthy. It's thinking in terms of the mindset of, oh, I'm trying to build a new identity of what would a healthy person do in this situation? Would a healthy person, go out and party every single night and not exercise, right? So every moment we have an opportunity to make a decision, and it is changing your identity, absolutely. And that's scary for people who are trying to make a lifestyle change, who have lived I mean, I'm 30 years old. Even if I had to say I have to completely change my whole lifestyle now, that's still scary. But I think people are afraid to put in the work, and they're afraid. I don't know if it's they're afraid of failure. They're afraid to fail, so they don't even want to take that first step. I think that could be a part of it. But I think it's also just being afraid of giving up what they currently have, even though they know it's what's killing them.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always tell people like, hey, if you're genuinely like really happy with your life, don't change. If you could honestly, really deep down inside say that to yourself. But if you're not, like, dude, what's it gonna hurt? Like, sure, change is tough, but living a life full of mental and physical pathology is like extremely difficult too. It's not easy, and it's also not rewarding, where that actual potential change could actually be rewarding and head you in the right direction, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of what do you want to touch on any other subjects like that? Because oftentimes that could be a little bit frustrating for practitioners as well, because it's like you're giving oftentimes this person great information that definitely works, but they're just not using it, They're using it like 3 days a week, but the other 4 days a week, it's a complete like nuclear disaster, and they're like, oh, what's going on? I did it 3 days a week, It's like, yeah, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could kind of touch on referring to like the trans theoretical model of change, right? And you have to meet someone where they're at, and if they're coming to you, they're no longer in pre-contemplation, they're in that contemplation stage. But I think it really comes down to you need the client, they need to dig into the reason why, right? They need to have their reason why. Because, yeah, they're coming to you, I want to lose weight. Okay, cool. Everyone in the world wants to lose weight, right? Not everyone, but why, right? What is the deeper meaning? Okay, you want to live longer. You want to move pain-free. You want to be able to sit in the airplane and fit in your seat. You want to be able to walk on the beach with your daughter and not be out of breath, right? You want to see your daughter graduate from college, right? Like, you want to find meaning in your life. And unless that person has that reason, I think that is really that determining factor of, right, it's that internal motivation versus external. And if they don't fully have that, then yeah, they're going to take the information, they're going to, refer to what they want out of it. They'll take what they want, but then they're not going to take that next step to fully put in that work, to again, adopt that new identity. And I think it's really hard, right? It's really, really hard to put in that work. I refer to the book, How to Do the Work. I'm totally blanking on the author right now, but she's a holistic psychologist, is a great book that I recommend to people. If you're struggling with kind of bridging that gap between like, I'm here and I need to be here. Because we really just got to figure out I don't want to say meaning in life, purpose or whatever. That doesn't have to necessarily be that deep, but ultimately, yeah, we have to figure out our meaning in life. But we got to have our reason why. Otherwise, we're just trying to lose 10 pounds to fit into a bathing suit for the next vacation or someone's wedding. And that's not sustainable. That's not long lasting.
Yeah, and kind of going back, rewinding a little bit, how was it working at Kaiser, being like in a holistic mindset of wanting to spend time with your clients and probably being written up for every time you spent more than like 15 minutes with your clients, basically? How did that, well, can you kind of give us the background of that? So,
No, I actually as dietitians, we get 45 minutes with our patients. Like I was saying earlier, so it's supposed to be 45 minutes, 15 minutes to chart on them. I would usually end up giving them 60 minutes, which, I was giving a lot of myself. And then I'm confined to the constraints of, well, here's an 8-hour workday. I usually would work longer than that because I would be charting. And like, I truly care about my patients. You and I both, we really care about what we do. We're passionate about it, and they needed help. So no, I would spend a longer time with them, but in terms of trying to practice from a holistic lens, definitely was constricted with what I could do, right? In terms of like gut health, right? We couldn't do any other GI map testing, or any other tests, right? It's not going to be covered or ordered by Kaiser. I'd have to order that separately, not covered by insurance. I would still give my recommendations though, in terms of herbal supplements and other, alternative medicine recommendations, whether it was in my scope or not within what Kaiser wanted me to do. I did get pushback a couple times that I was practicing outside of my scope. And, I helped diagnose the patient with H. pylori that a doctor just literally pushed them aside for. Because again, the doctor didn't have enough time to be with that patient to really truly ask the questions that I asked. I then, asked the doctor, could we test the patient for H. pylori? And sure enough, he had H. pylori, then got treated. And, that patient later followed up with me, just thanking me for taking the time, to dig deeper and to think about that. But, I had my frustrations while there, but I definitely learned a lot still from working within that organization. And, I'm not like against Western medicine and our healthcare system, but I think there definitely needs to be changes made across the board, in every organization and in every hospital.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I can say to that, but
I'm not, and to make it clear, I'm not against medicine either. Just against the way it's being used as a first course of action these days. No absolutes. There's a time and place for everything. Like I got a serious ear infection one time that like spread to my jaw the next day. I couldn't even open my mouth. And yeah, I took antibiotics, and I feel like maybe I could have toughed it out and survived. I don't know for sure, but for sure, like when I took it, it went away, like a week later, and it was completely gone, and I was fine. So there's a place and time for it. Just my issue is just, once again, this kind of conveyor belt, like factory farm system where they're not asking enough questions, because that kind of boils my blood sometimes, because I totally see myself in patients when I injured my back, and I got the same exact treatment. That's why it took a few years to find someone like Stuart McGill or Paul Chek or Brian Carroll, for example, to really lead me to the right resources to really kind of cure my condition. I've been pain-free for a long time now. But I'm like, man, I could have, like, I literally wasted like probably, I don't know, $10,000 running around paying co-pays and paying this person, like you mentioned, going to this PT, that PT, this chiropractor, that chiropractor, et cetera, et cetera. And then my pain is always kind of still there. Luckily, it wasn't like so paralyzing, debilitating where I couldn't walk, but it's still kind of annoying, and it's very draining on your energy, having to deal with even low chronic acute pain all day, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, yeah, it's, once again, not against medicine. It's just totally how it's just become like a huge corporate entity that doesn't really.
It's a business at the end of the day.
Yeah, they need you, like it's a revolving door, man. They need you in and out of there quick. And I mean, I hate to say it, I don't even know if it's really the case, but I mean, I don't know if people are waking up to the fact that without behavioral change, all that medicine does is really just continue to allow them to keep kind of being the dummy that led them into that problem, for just a little bit longer, but then there are always side effects. And then all of a sudden you have more medications to counter the side effects of those. And then you're like 50 years old, look terrible, feel terrible, haven't had an erection in like 10 years, maybe haven't even seen your penis in forever either. And now you're on like 15 different medications, and still trusting that very system. I'm like, dude, come on, wake up to the reality, man. This shit's not working. It's just making shit worse for you, you know? That is just kind of sad to see.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. But, you know, you and I, amongst many others, are trying to change that and trying to get the word out and, you know, trying to help as many people as we can.
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but what was the final straw that made you kind of leave Kaiser and now just be like self-employed and doing your own thing where you could really actually help people and spend time with them and hear their stories of what led them to the problem, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it was always the plan of mine to kind of the whole becoming a dietitian. It's always taught to us you need to work in clinical first. So, you know, I worked in hospitals for 2 years, and then I went to outpatient. And it was just kind of a part of the plan that I wanted to get as much education and experience as I could before starting my private practice. And I don't regret any of it. I loved every experience that I had. But, you know, the many limitations of not being able to fully provide what I wanted to provide was just, you know, it got to me. I was mostly remote for a good portion of my job, but, you know, working inside an office is just not for me. It's very dark and the lighting is not good. Unfortunately, many dietitian offices are in the basement. I became vitamin D deficient when I was working in the hospital because I barely saw sunlight. I'd get there at 7:30. I'd leave at like 5. So there were a lot of things. And then the frustration of the medical community, especially in the hospital, like, you know, doctors, they don't give a shit about dietitians. And okay, I can't say that about every single one of them. They, number one, didn't know what a dietitian did, right? They just thought, oh, food service, they bring the patients food. So not having the respect from the healthcare community, being underpaid is a huge, huge one. We have a master's degree and we're making less than some of the nurses and other people there who have, you know, less education, less schooling than us.
And are providing, in my opinion, an inferior service outside of emergency services. They are. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So that's a big touch point for dietitians as a whole, that we're trying to change that. We're trying to educate people on what we do and how impactful we are in the hospital and in outpatient and just in the world as a whole. A lot of people still don't understand what dietitians are, what we do, any of that. So all of those things culminated. I also didn't like my work schedule, and it was just not flexible in the slightest. And between my private practice and a few of my other side projects, it just was like adding up. And I knew the thing that didn't serve me was, you know, working for an organization. So now I'm an entrepreneur, and that was ultimately what, you know, led me to here now. So I left beginning of August, so it hasn't been that long. But I'm enjoying every moment of the journey and continuing to learn and grow as I go along.
Yeah, and from my observation, I guarantee you guys, like if you hire someone like Jackie versus going from an MD, you'll actually become healthy. You know, it just needs to people. It's just not right, man. People need to realize like a proper assessment takes like, you know, 1, 2, 3 hours, if not longer, depending on a person's situation. And that kind of service just needs to, like the average consumer doesn't see it because it's not their specialty, which is totally understandable. They have their work to worry about and kind of master, et cetera, et cetera. But that's how a proper assessment goes. It takes time. It's like kind of dating. Imagine trying to learn everything about the person in 5 minutes and then decide whether you want to marry this person or not, you know, or continue even a relationship with this person. That might be a bad tie-in, but you guys understand what I'm saying. And yeah, okay, they have to pay out of pocket probably to gain your services, but let's look at it this way. I mean, dude, the average American is spending $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses every year. Alcohol, eating out with coworkers at lunch, subscription services like Netflix, that new iPhone or electronics. I'm not even counting travel. If you count travel, easily throw 2, 3, 4, or even more thousands of dollars onto that tab. And I'm not even counting medical expenses, which could be, astronomical to like a base minimum of like $5,000 to $7,000 a year, paying for basically services related to poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, which doctors don't even cover with you anyways, but someone like Jackie does. Then it's like, okay, you totally have the money to pay for those services. It's the weekend, if you really sat down and looked over your financial books and be honest with yourself. And a lot of people are just totally in a state of numbing themselves out 24/7. And unfortunately, the truth is, it's just, you're not ever going to get better until you wake up to that. But if you're honest to yourself, you will see you have the amount of money to hire a great, competent, like registered dietitian, like Jackie, for example, that will actually spend time with you and get to know you and have a good follow-up procedure to make sure you actually see your goals through, and give you the right amount of information to actually like find your health, instead of just throwing harmful medical drugs your way. And then you wonder why you're looking uglier and fatter and full of more disease and misery year after year. It's going to be a big surprise for most, but it's not your genetics. Sorry to break it to you. It's actually, like I mentioned before, you're doing it to yourself, so you can stop doing it to yourself. And if you need any guidance, because I know this could be a complicated topic, especially with social media these days, we'll cover that in a second. You can hire someone like Jackie, to clarify those topics for you, make sure you're reading the right books, you're going down the right path, etc. But having said that, what's your take on nutrition advice in the social media realm? Because that could be a circus. You have this one very credible person saying, do one thing. You have this one very credible person with 2 million followers saying, do the complete opposite of that thing. Then you have this third guy saying both of these guys are retarded. And for the average consumer that's just looking for reasonable information, what's some advice you have for them? Because I know that could be frustrating, especially for you, probably watching that world unfold as well. It's kind of like sometimes comical.
Yeah, I have to, I don't ever really take anything too seriously. Can't take life too seriously. I try to just laugh at it and do what I can. But yeah, the influencers on TikTok, on Instagram, that, they look pretty, they have the body, and then they have the followers, but they don't have any education. They don't have the knowledge. They actually didn't put in the work. Like, they were just born, they look that way. But they're saying, drink this pill, take this shake, whatever, and you're going to look like me. That's not realistic. Number one, I could give someone exactly what I do, and you're not going to end up looking like me, right? That is genetics, right? So yeah, I just tell everyone to take everything with a grain of salt, and to try to find credible, trustworthy people who are posting. I've been grappling with this myself lately, because there are some pretty credible people out there, and even amongst that, we have differing views, right? And what I've the consensus that I've kind of come to is, we just don't fully know exactly, right? The research is always changing. Nutrition is a science, and science changes. And we should be adopting to that new science that is coming out, right? We can't be following recommendations from 20 years ago. But I think it needs to be personalized. You need to see what is right for you. Like, there's a huge influencer who's all about carnivore diet, and there's a huge influencer who's all about, keto. It's figuring out what works best for you and trying to numb away all that excessiveness. Because when it comes down to it, it really is pretty simple, right? Like, we mentioned a few of the things, like, are you getting veggies on your plate? Like, those are the fundamental things that we know are working. So we have to kind of silence all that extra noise. But ultimately, I know it can be super overwhelming. People come to me and they're like, I'm frustrated. I don't know, like, can I eat eggs? Can I not eat eggs? Am I supposed to cook with butter or ghee? Or now
can I eat
seed
food?
oils are terrible. Yeah, like, what do I eat? There's nothing left to eat. So focusing on what we can eat, right? Focusing on what feels best for your body. And that takes time, right? And working with someone like a dietitian or even like you to figure out, which foods are best for you. Because it's not one size fits all. And me personally, I kind of pick and choose and adopt different philosophies and kind of form my nutrition philosophy from that. But it is all science evidence based, right? I think that's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues of seeking free advice online, because even if you find a credible person, the problem is like this practitioner has never met you, so there's no way. It's kind of like, imagine showing up at a doctor's office and before they even talk to you, they're like, here, just take this medication. It's like, whoa, you don't even know my situation. Like, how are you referring? It's the same thing. They might actually be very good at what they do, but because they never met you personally, that advice could be that they're talking about in that specific video or clip or whatever could be taken completely out of context. So that's one of the issues I see, especially people with like a lot of gut dysbiosis. It's hard to follow any nutrition advice. You really need very competent practitioners to really walk you through the steps of that, and kind of listening to your family members, unless they're like a very competent registered dietitian, for example, or they're just very knowledgeable about nutrition. It's probably going to lead you down the wrong path. My best advice is like, you literally have two options. And I mean this in the best way is you become your own mechanic, which inevitably would require you to invest 10, 15 hours a week in studying yourself, like thoroughly reading the research, the books. And then eventually you'll find out that you need to hire a mentor anyways, because a mentor will help put some blind spots together for you, also help you integrate everything in a more efficient way. Or you could be, if you're, it's not your passion field, I get it, and you're too busy, your only option is really just to hire someone that's very competent. And that's it. And if you don't do either of those two things, I just don't see a possibility of a person getting better. It's not like it's just going to magically resolve itself. You know what I mean? Especially if you, that belief system, those behavioral patterns are most likely oftentimes just unconsciously done at that stage of a person's life, are ever reversed. So it's like, like really educate yourself, but really do it. Take courses every year, read a bunch of books, at least 2 books a month, hire mentors left and right. Then at the end of the day, you're going to have to figure out those little teeny details for yourself too, of what specifically works and maximizes your health. Or B, just hire a person from the get-go to help you walk through the steps and save you a tremendous amount of time, because your health is super important, guys. And you're kind of brainwashed to believe, in American culture especially, you're brainwashed to believe that being overweight, having gut issues, relying on medical drugs for your health is like normal, but it's not normal. That's like straight up pathology 101. And it's not working. I mean, be honest with yourself. Like, take a look at the mirror, and just be honest with yourself. I mean, that kind of like haggard look, that overweight physique, that energy levels that are all over the place, can't sleep at night, sex drive is low, have gut issues, have anxiety, depression. I mean, these are all signs that there's something deeply not right, and they need to be investigated, not like accepted as normal. I know it has been normalized because literally almost everyone has like a million of issues they're facing with, because everyone has basically normalized pathology and not even like living like a freaking human being anymore. So anyways, my rant, and I totally kind of spaced out what topic we're talking about, but also regarding certifications, can you talk
influencers?
Yeah, influencers. So that's my take on seeking free information online. It's a dead end trap. If anything, it can kind of open you up to new ideas of thinking, but inevitably you have to do your own research of investing a lot of time per week, reading, educating, taking courses, or just hire a very competent practitioner of what you're trying to achieve. And that's it. You're not just going to kind of like randomly figure out like the complexity of the human body and mind on your own because, 2 planets aligned and now the waves of the sea are at this certain height and all of a sudden everything. That's just not how it works. So just be realistic. And if you want like a concrete resolution, you got to do one of those two things, or expect 2013 to look exactly like 2002 and to look exactly like the last 10 years. Remember, if nothing changes, nothing changes. It's that simple, okay? And don't expect just a change to miraculously happen. But Jackie, can you also touch on certifications? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding there, because you see a lot of like certified nutritionists, and the average consumer thinks that this person is a registered dietitian, but it's definitely not the case. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so a registered dietitian, first and foremost, well, you need a bachelor's degree. And then you need to do 1,200 hours working in your rotations in the hospitals and different community settings. You need to take a national board exam. Then that certifies you as you're accredited by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and gives you the legal certification and title of dietitian. You do now need a master's degree. They kept changing the date because of COVID. I want to say it's by next year you have to have a master's degree in order to become a dietitian. So that added level as well. Versus nutritionists or certified nutritionists, whatever they want to call themselves. You don't really need any of that. You just can take an exam. Like Precision Nutrition has a certification, right? Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. Unfortunately, right, there are some states where legally you cannot give nutrition advice, medical nutrition therapy as a nutritionist. California is not one of them. So in California, anyone can just do anything. But even with that, no one's checking. So, nutritionists can be doing and saying whatever the heck they want to say. And, no one's finding out about it. So the regulatory, bodies for that, it's not super supportive of like the fact that we jump through all these hoops. In order to work in a hospital, you have to be a registered dietitian to do that. But there are some, super helpful, very well-educated nutritionists out there. So, we can't we're not overgeneralizing everything,
Yes,
but
true.
Those influencers on Instagram are usually most likely going to be nutritionists. We will likely put RD as our credential on our bio to differentiate between, all the other noise out there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Jackie, are there any other topics you would like to cover today?
I don't think so. I think we hit on kind of what I was expecting and some. And no, I think it was a good discussion.
Cool. Okay. Well, it's good to see you first and foremost, and thanks for being a guest today.
Same.
And then we'll text back and forth. We'll keep in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
All right, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.